Hello, and welcome to the Academy of Conscious Creators webinar, where we have extraordinary discussions to empower you to create the story of your life. Each week, you will discover how to overcome painful patterns of mental, emotional, and physical distress, how to drop the mask of your public persona, and revolutionary steps of what you can do to awaken your true health and potential. You have the power to create a new story of your life starting right now. So, what's your story? With 2020 witnessing a new culture of mask wearing, many have experienced great anxiety, uncertainty, and depression as fear of the unknown, fear of our imminent death, and fear of not having enough sets in. I'm your host, Victoria, and welcome to our show. Today, Pete and I will explore the topic, who is behind the mask, and what the future might look like when we drop the mask to reveal our true, authentic self. So, Pete, let's talk about masks, because they're very prominent in today's culture. Yet our listeners may not realise the invisible masks that they've been wearing for most of their lives. So where do these invisible masks come from?
Yeah, hi Victoria, and hi listeners. So yeah, I mean that's a great question, and I was kind of thinking about that as you were talking about it, and I guess if you go back far enough, in terms of anthropology, I guess you can kind of trace it back to perhaps caveman and cavewomen times where because we were in tribes, ultimately if a member of the tribe didn't behave themselves in a certain way or was acting out of character, they perhaps ran the risk of being ostracized and pushed out of the tribe. And so I guess surviving on your own would have been very, very difficult in those days. So who knows, it may have stemmed from there. But let's kind of bring that forward to like today's kind of situation. And I think, experts talk about the main part of our conditioning occurring in the first 7 years of our lives. I think 0 to 7 years. And then thereafter, it's a much lesser effect. And I think that's, ultimately what happens is we start to create these masks as a means of protecting some part of us that's been hurt in some way. Mm-hmm. And typically that would start from some experience that we had in childhood at some time. So I guess, if you think about casting your mind back, was there a scenario that you may have gone through when you were younger that perhaps has kind of like given you some kind of programming to create a mask? Do you think of anything?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess one of the instances I remember is, I think must have been about 13, 14. And I remember coming home from school and telling my mum that, I'd been bullied at school that day, and, looking just to be, maybe her sit me on her lap. Well, maybe I was too old to be sat on a lap, but, give me a hug and reassure me that it was all right. And the response I got from her was just like, well, you must have done something too. And there was just no compassion or sympathy at all. And I think that, well, not knowing at the time, but I think that was maybe one of the starting points of me developing low self-esteem and just not feeling good enough, thinking that I deserved, what I got, basically. So, yeah, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I probably got quite a few, if I think about it. I think certainly what happened with me in my life was that my real dad died when I was 11 months old. So I got like a dad 2.0 when I was about 3 or 4. But I definitely think that on a subconscious level, I'd obviously suffered a loss. And so I was very, very open to being programmed in a way that, I wanted to make sure that I still got loved and, was given comfort and all that type of stuff. So I think that going through that particular loss made me even more susceptible to be reactive to scenarios that you come across with your parents, and reactive to the way in which they speak to you. But I think to your point, one of the tough things about being a parent is that you don't actually know what the impact is going to be of the words that you're saying to your child, right? You don't
Sure.
know that.
Hmm.
And, this is always one of the kind of the hidden difficulties of parenthood. Obviously, if you make an overt point of saying, no, you're never going to amount to anything, you're never really good, then you know that through what you're saying, that's going to have some kind of negative impact. But
Right.
but in the main, parents will just say certain things and not think anything about it. And depending on how young you are, your brain and your mental capacities aren't developed enough to be able to process and contextualize what they've said to you. So all you do is you just take it on, and you
Hmm.
think, right, okay, I've done something wrong. Therefore, the next time that I encounter a situation, in your case, it was bullying. Next time I encounter that situation, I need to act in a different way in order to to make sure that the bully doesn't go through to its conclusion. And this is where the
Hmm.
kind of the mask wearing begins. And I think that's kind of like how it all starts. It starts certainly in the 0 to 7 years, but
Yeah.
does continue on a bit later thereafter.
Yeah, yeah, and I think obviously we're not even conscious when we put on these protective masks because they're sort of showing the outside world that we're okay, but really we're hiding the parts of ourselves that we've not really fully owned and developed. So then we, put on a facade, and over time this can cause us to feel unsafe in the world, or we start to believe that this is our true selves. This facade, all these masks that we've put, one over the other,
Mm.
that we perceive as our personality that we're putting out to the world. But in that turn, it also creates a lot of discomfort in our bodies because we're ungrounded. We might have low sort of vital energy, low life force. We don't feel like we're in control of our lives, and this can have a real impact on our health.
Yeah, yeah. I think there are many knock-on effects, and I think that as science evolves and the understanding of the mind-body connection evolves, it becomes more and more clear and apparent that emotions and experiences that have gone on are somehow informing and impacting the way that our bodies behave, and therefore what our health is like and all this type of
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And so yeah, I mean, I'm certainly also thinking about certain traits that I've got, certain health aspects that I have, and trying to link them back to, I wonder if it was because of this, that, and the other that I went
Yeah,
through when
sure.
I was younger. But yeah, I mean, we certainly build up layer after layer after layer to protect ourselves from for the world, other people, situations that we've come across that we don't want to repeat.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge is, yeah, what actually is the true us, right? You've got so many layers on top of the true you that you forget who you are, and
Mm-hmm.
so in trying to think about an easy kind of way to start to get back to understand who one is at their true essence. I mean, obviously, you can't really describe that in words because I think the nature of the self is obviously beyond words, right? But probably a key thing that you can do is that you can start to tune in to your emotions and see how you react to things and how you feel about things, and then
Mm-hmm.
use that as a guidance system to see whether what you're doing and what you're experiencing is in alignment with who you are as a person or an entity, or whether it's not. And then you should basically move forward according to the inner guidance that you have. So I think that's one of the things that we can start to do to regain our own power of self-identity, and yeah, and start to be more authentic to who we truly are. So yeah, that's my initial take anyway.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess that's what we've been exploring for many years is how understanding our energy, because of course we're taught from a very young age to be up in our heads and to be analysing things and logical, and actually it's our feeling body that really that's what tells us the truth of something. And life, I think the misconception is that life treats you badly, but actually there's always good things, good opportunities for us in life. And if you're not getting that, then that's a sign definitely to, start looking at, well, what am I putting out to the world where I feel unsafe? And therefore I'm attracting experiences which confirm my feelings of being unsafe in the world.
Yeah, and so you kind of get into this kind of self-perpetuating loop, and and it's tough, right? And I think there's obviously a degree of controversy around the point of view that things that happen in life are there for us from a positive perspective, okay? Because let's face it, a lot of negative things do happen in life, without doubt. But I think what you're saying and what you're perhaps getting at is, depending upon your perspective of what you're going through, that can reshape how you interpret the good or the bad. And
Mm.
I guess it's a bit like every cloud has a silver lining. Now, it's easier said than done. As you're looking at someone else's situation that they're going through it and you're not going through it. But no doubt about it. I think that if you go through a painful chapter in your life and you keep moving away from that pain, then you're never going to get a chance to really heal it. And what you have to do is you have to turn around and go into the pain and
Mm-hmm.
understand what it's trying to tell you, and learn through it that way. But no one's saying that this stuff is easy. But yeah, I think it's about embracing
Mm.
the challenge and the difficulty, and then coming out the other side, renewed and transformed and with a fresh set of eyes. Um, I may have slightly,
No,
digressed
well,
from.
I was just going to add to that because, as you were saying, that we've got to go through it. We've got to look at what's coming up for us so that we can understand and go through it and come out the other side. And I think, whether we're wearing our invisible mask or the mask that we're, now seeing on our high streets, um, it's about being responsible, isn't it? Taking responsibility for how we feel and choosing how we're going to feel today. Who is responsible for our life? And I think, as we've been saying, from an early age, we've always had to sort of depend on someone else making decisions for us, and whether that's our parents or our teacher. And so it's very difficult as we grow up to sort of um,
Conditioning.
shake that and start, stepping into our own responsibility and deciding what's best for us. And I think a good example can be like I think I can give an example of when I had some health problems and my back had gone and had really bad sciatica for a couple of years, and
Mhm.
went to the doctors, and of course um, medication to help with the pain. But that was actually a time when I started to recognize that I knew more, what would work for me than my doctor did. But of course,
Sure.
again, we've been brought up to believe that whatever the doctor says is true. And this is not, no disrespect to any of our GPs out there, but it was just a time for me to start to recognize that actually I was the one living with the pain, and therefore I knew what would work for me. And I think that goes with any sort of decision in life. And that's where we start to recognize, well, what is our true self that's hiding behind these masks? Because we start to act from our emotions, that's, our truth. And that comes from how we feel about an experience or what someone said or what's going on around us, and starting to discern the truth from the non-truths, essentially.
Yeah, no, but the point's very well made, and that whole kind of way of being in terms of giving away your power to somebody external or something external is, that's one of the biggest obstacles that we have to overcome as a race, right? As a human
Mm.
race. Yeah, we need to remember that. Yeah, to your point, you knew what was best for you in terms of how to address the pain that you were going through, or you certainly had a better understanding of what was going on inside you than the doctor did. But
Right, because it was an emotional connection in the long run. It wasn't,
that's
the
right.
physical symptoms had come as a result of not dealing with emotional stuff.
There you go.
Yeah,
Yeah, which goes back to what we were saying before about,
right.
science is starting to catch up. Although there's still a way to go in terms of traditional doctors, but I think naturopaths and naturopathic doctors are certainly there, or
Mm-hmm.
thereabouts, in terms of that connection. But yeah, that whole disempowerment thing is crazy, and giving away your power to someone in the uniform, someone in a lab coat, someone wearing glasses or whatever. And I read an interesting book, well, a series of books actually, by a guy called Jocko Willink, and some of you may have heard of him. Long story short, he's like an ex-retired US SEAL, Navy SEAL, and he went over to Iraq, as they say over in the US, and so he and his second in command or whatever, they came back and they basically decided to write a set of books that were embodying the teachings of warfare and how to take responsibility, how to manage teams, how to manage up the chain and down the chain of command, and put that into a corporate setting. And I think I can't remember the name of the book now, the name of the books, but I think it's like extreme ownership, I think, is one of them. But the point being is that they were talking about how to properly take responsibility for things that occur in our lives, right? And that was known, the most important place that could ever be happening was on a battlefield where people's lives are at stake, right? So the wrong choice or the wrong assigning of responsibility or the abdication of responsibility could result in somebody's death. So,
or your own, right?
Yeah, or your own, right? Yeah. So, I've embodied and taken on board, and still am taking a lot of learnings from those books, and also remembering, that I'm not here to defer my inner authority to anybody external to myself, and that the direction of my life has to come from the inside out and not the outside in. And that's one of the lessons that we're here to learn, I think.
Yeah, really good point. And
So,
and just off the back of that, I'm thinking about how a lot of our belief systems are inherent in our ancestry, and these are sometimes the things that we don't even realize we're carrying. I remember coaching somebody he was always worried, and I said, well, why are you always worried? And he said, oh, well, my mum worried. I was like, well, that was your mum. And we're completely blind to these patterns and the masks that we've put on, because a lot of it is conditioned through not just the last generation, but maybe many generations. And it's up to us to become more aware and start to recognize, well, what's mine, what isn't mine, and then how do I sort of let go of the things that don't serve me, so that I can really step into my true, authentic nature.
Yeah, no, I think that's a brilliant point, and I think about that periodically as well. So I look at my genetic lineage, which so I'm West Indian in terms of the last, I don't know, 10 or so generations, but if you go back far enough, obviously I'm African, and so with all the stuff that's gone on within my race of people, what messages and what thought processes and what pain is still within the genetic mapping there that I'm taking, others are taking it through. And it is very much about getting to that point of recognition where you say, okay, well, what's the legacy stuff, and then what's the contemporary stuff, and what's that point of demarcation. And I'm not saying it's ever going to be that cut and dried, that okay, that stops here and that begins here, but to start to be aware of the baggage that you're taking, that's not yours, that you've brought with you. It's an empowering process to be going through, because once again you start to tap into the real you, who you really are, as opposed to the other coats that you've been wearing for one reason or another. And I don't know how I'm going to feel once I've managed to shed a number of more coats and different masks and stuff, but it's certainly a process of transformation that I think behooves anyone to kind of want to go through and figure out, and to get to the closer to the root of who they really are. So that's an ongoing work in progress for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think it's exciting at the same time, and just think, look at what potential is is there for you that at the moment you might be feeling is limited, and unleashes more opportunities in our lives.
This is it. I think, look, the first place to start is you have to get to grips with the nature of your own mentality, And what I mean by that is, you have to make a conscious decision as to whether you are going to be a glass half full or a glass half empty person. Because I think by nature we tend to feel, to fit into one or the other kind of positions. And if you are a person that is a half empty kind of person, then you need to make a conscious decision to start to change your thought process into a glass half full. And then as you go through that transformation and you stick to it and you keep to it, you start to notice that life does change. So I certainly think that the starting point is to make sure that you refocus your outlook so that it's beneficial as beneficial for you as it can be on a day-to-day basis, to make sure that you're not deliberately sabotaging yourself just because you've got a slightly kind of glass half empty kind of perspective. So start there and then see what occurs and what manifests on the back of making that shift. And then, you kind of reiterate and go through these different elements of development. So, yeah. It's all good stuff.
And the fears that that we have around what may or may not happen, the world has always been unknown. We've never really known for sure what's around the corner and what's going to happen or the outcome of any experience in our lives. So I think if we can be open to at least expecting it to be good rather than the worst, we often find that the actual fear of what we were fearing is worse than the actual thing, that the outcome, than what happened.
You're right. You're right. And actually, on that point, I think there's an exercise that we have as part of our coaching, which is what's the worst that can happen, right? So you kind of get people to catastrophize, basically go through like a worst case scenario. So let's say for sake of argument that you came out of your house one day and all of a sudden all your clothes fell off. Right? The moths have been at work overnight and they chomped away on the seams of your clothes and you got totally exposed to the world, right? What's the worst that could happen? Well, I'd run away, I'd do this, people would laugh at me, whatever. But whatever happens, if you're still alive at the end of the day, having gone through that stuff, right? It hasn't done you in, right? So was it Nietzsche? I think that says, what doesn't kill you makes me stronger, right? So I think, that's a good thing to go through in order to kind of nullify the fear to a degree of that thing that you're worrying about. Just kind of just play it through and say, well, actually, what is the worst that can happen here? Okay, so if that happens, I'm still alive at the end of it, so I'll still be okay. So let's push ahead and do that.
Exactly. So, and actually, often if we push up against the friction, then that's when we break down these barriers and start to drop these masks that are holding us back from reaching a higher potential. So I guess undertaking the pressures in life can be really challenging at times, and it's really useful to have a toolbox of techniques to help us better manage our mental, physical and emotional health and well-being, and start creating a more positive outcome. So we'll start. We're running out of time now, so we'll just let the listeners know, or the viewers know, that they can join in this discussion by submitting their comments or questions to our Facebook page, which is the Academy of Conscious Creators. We will be answering any questions in our follow-up weekly live short answer sessions, so do tune in for that.
Fantastic.
And thank you for joining me today, Pete. And
my pleasure.
We are looking forward to helping you to create the story of your life, so do join us next week.